Hi, everybody, all 5 of you. Welcome for coming. Thank you very much for coming. Last week on Zoom, I spoke about creating strategy. I started the process of discussing what strategic thinking means and how we essentially need to take all kinds of divergent intelligence and pull that intelligence into a coherent format that we can use. Now, there are a lot of ways to do this. And it's important that we choose the best way for us to do it. Okay? So there are people who will tell you, you have to do it a specific way. And they will, when you go into a business, sometimes those businesses have very specific systems that they use in order to teach their people how to think about intelligence gathering. How to read data. How to make the data relevant for them. How to create what I would say is a knowledge tree, right, that allows them to understand what they've got and what they're missing. Now, what do I mean by knowledge tree? Going biblical for a minute, you think tree of knowledge, right? What do you think of?
Adam and Eve.
Okay, but what do you think? What is it that they learned, supposedly? Does anyone know? What? They learned about evil, right? So you go, okay, wait a second. That means that there was a gap in their knowledge prior to attaining that knowledge, right? So let's think about it like this. The knowledge trees that we build are very much the same thing. We don't know what's missing, what the evil is, or what the bad thing is, or what are the leaves that we don't see, or even the branches of the tree that we don't see until later, sometimes until a surprise happens and it kicks us in the butt. But our job when we are in the strategic stage is to try and minimize, as much as humanly possible, those gaps, the things that are missing, the things we don't know, or the things that we don't know are important. In order to do that, we need to contemplate what are the channels through which we are gathering our intelligence. And how are we applying strategic thinking to that to translate that intelligence that's gathered and output something which makes sense to whoever we need to talk to? What do I mean? Well, in the military, for instance, there is a slew of different channels through which we gather intelligence. Anyone? Take a guess. Give me one. Spying. Human intelligence. What else? Hacking. Cyber. What else? There's a lot. Come on. Open intelligence. Mm-hmm. Come on. Think about it. There's more. I want to move from here to there. Geographically, what do I need?
Pictures.
Maps, right? So SAT-INT, right? Satellite intelligence, electronic intelligence. There's so many different channels that we can use to gather intelligence. Now, you say for yourself, okay, that's great, that's the military. But we do that all the time. I mean, if you think about it, if you're planning on going somewhere, what do you pull out first? Like, you need to plan a trip. A map. You look at Waze, right? You pull out Waze and you start looking at a map and you go, hey, what's gonna make it difficult for me to get from here to there? Now, before Waze, it was difficult to know what was gonna make it difficult for you to do that, right? Before Waze, you said, well, I know that is generally, trafficy on this road at this time, but that's based on previous intelligence, on previous iterations that we've had, and it's based on presumption. And
experience.
Right, exactly. I'm saying it's based on previous experience and assumption. The assumption that what happened yesterday will happen again today. But what if there's an accident? What if they suddenly close the road because there's a water pipe that went and you don't even know about it, and then you're stuck in traffic for hours? Nowadays, right, when we go out, very often before we even get in the car, Waze, what's the fastest route? Where is there traffic jams? What's bothering me? This is an attempt on our part to minimize the gaps in our knowledge tree. An attempt to create a situation where we've maximized the intelligence gathering that we can do in order to allow ourselves to minimize surprise and maximize our effectiveness. Why? Because strategy is about maximizing intelligence. Effectiveness is about what's the best way to do something moving forward given what we know. right? So we take, you have a question? Was that, oh, that was just that. Okay, no, that's great, okay. So if you think about it, all these divergent intelligence, and a lot of it's about ourselves, like, well, how rushed am I? How quickly do I need to get there? You know, do I like being on time, or am I okay being fashionably late? That's, even those things impact how we read the world, how we read the intelligence that we're gathering. So our job is to take all this information, put it into a coherent format, a format that makes sense to us. Now, if you go into intelligence, the field of intelligence, you're going to read one of their things and be like, I don't understand half the words that are here. Because there's words that are being used that I don't understand, because there's information here that doesn't make sense to me. But for someone in the field, it makes perfect sense. And so what we want to try and understand for ourselves right now is, if you guys are at a stage where you are thinking strategically, you need to contemplate, well, what do we know? But more importantly, what don't we know, and how do we get that information? What don't we know, and how do we get that information? And the only way to do that is to be really honest with yourself. It's to be really honest and say, I don't know. Now, most people don't like saying, I don't know, right? Who likes saying, I don't know? But the fact is that to think strategically, it's a requirement. You need to be able to say, I don't know, let's find out. Let's gather that information, let's gather that intelligence. What we do as we do that is we create a sense of where we are right now. And that becomes our knowledge tree. It can even become a knowledge forest, right? Where all the different aspects of it, each of them has their own sort of like tree within the forest, and even has branches off on it and things like that. And as we create these trees and these forests, we sort of give them labels. This is my knowledge about my family. So I have my family knowledge tree. What do I know about my kids and about my wife and about my family, right? And then you've got your school friends family tree, your school friends knowledge tree. What do you know about them, and what are their likes and their dislikes? They're not the same, right? They're inherently different, but they're important. And at some point we have to say, okay, I know enough. I know enough to move forward, right? I know how to make a birthday party for that person, easy. I got all the information I need. I know how to move forward with this app because I've worked with X, Y, and Z people to find out what they need, and I know, for the most part, what it is that customer base needs in order for me to create a vision and perhaps give them what they want, which is really what you do when you're gathering intelligence. You want to understand what's the customer base want, or what is the industry doing, and how can I play within that field, right? So what we do is we create all this intelligence, we gather all this divergent intelligence, and we start creating a whole bunch of scenarios. We go, well, if I do this, based on what I know, what is my expectation for an outcome in an ideal world? And that's an important point that I'm making. It's in an ideal world. It's not in reality, because we acknowledge in the strategic stage that reality hasn't yet hit us in the butt. We haven't yet started to engage reality enough to make something happen. Hi, Yakers. It's quite all right. So we start making if then and when then statements. What are if then and when then? If we do this, then I expect that to happen. If I cook this, then I expect that to happen. If I create this program, then I expect these people to want to use it. When this happens, I will respond by doing that. Parenting is really important here. Parents and leaders need to do this all the time. When people start calling in sick, COVID, when people tell me they can't come because their kids are in isolation, in quarantine, then I'm going to do this as my way of responding to it. Now at the beginning, when you get surprised, you go, and you don't have a then, right? But once you understand the possibility that something may happen, right, you fill that knowledge gap, right? And there were people who knew that there was going to be a pandemic. Now I don't mean, let me be very clear, I don't mean that they knew that there was going to be a pandemic on this day, in this form, whatever, but George Bush read a book in like 2000 or something that talked about the next big pandemic, and he was like, we need to prepare for this. And you go, really? Yes, really. So it's not that there wasn't people who had this within their knowledge bank. The point is that it wasn't yet of critical importance that it required attention, or people didn't perceive it that way. So we take all this and we create this ideal type of if then, when this happens, then I'll do this. If this happens, then I can do this. If I do this, then we can succeed in doing that, right? And we start creating for ourselves this essence of self and other. I know enough about myself as an organization, as a unit, and I know enough about whoever it is I'm engaging with, the enemy, my competition, with my customers, with my children, whoever, that now I feel like I can start moving forward and actually start engaging in some way. But how do I do that? Right? So the challenge is to learn about the issue. The challenge is to set the ideal types and delineate clear expectations. What do I mean? Now that we've got all this intelligence, right? And I know that I'm reviewing from last week, I just quickly go through it. Now that we've got all this intelligence, put it together, and we're sort of driving it forward to something, right? What are we gonna do? We've learned everything about the issue, we've created the ideal types, and then we're gonna delineate clear expectations. What does that mean? It means, I'm gonna answer that question myself. What does it mean? It means that I know what I expect of myself in terms of behavior, in terms of tactics, in terms of operations, in terms of resources, and I know what I believe will be the response by the other. Now you go, wait a second, how do you know but you believe? I'm going to set myself up for failure in some way, but I'm also setting myself for success. Why? Because I'm making a decision, a strategic decision, to engage in a specific way. Will I succeed or will I fail? Well, that depends. Who does it depend on? It doesn't depend on me. It depends on the other. It depends on who I'm working with. Okay? So the one thing we need to worry about is that when we try and delineate these clear expectations, that there's a possibility that we're working under the auspices of information overload. What does that mean? It means that if I've said this to you enough times, or if you've got enough information, great, but if you continue seeking information, then what happens? You never create the if-then statements properly, because you always feel like you're missing something in that tree of knowledge. So we start knowing things and we create a system and formula for which we can understand how everything is related. And as we move forward, we start looking at different dimensions of strategy. Now, Professor Gray divides the dimensions of strategy into 3 major groupings. He says, you've got your people, your relationships and your people, you've got your resources, and you've sort of got actionable stuff, okay? Inside each of these dimensions, he gives a slew of different elements that may be involved and that you need to know enough about in order to move forward, right? You have to find out about the people involved. What's the society and the culture and the civilization? Like, if you want to conquer Afghanistan, you gotta understand Afghanistan, right? If you want to conquer Iraq, you gotta understand Iraq. You have to understand their mentality, their culture. You have to understand how to transmit what you want to get done in an effective manner. And then you look at things like resources, the economics, logistics, the organization, how things are put together for yourself and for the other. And as you start doing this, you start to realize where your gaps are, where the gaps are in your knowledge tree. Now, the one thing we do almost automatically is we start making assumptions based on the information that we have about those gaps. We start making really deep assumptions about them. And if you know anything about how assume is written, it makes an ass of you and me, right? A-S-S-U. There's a reason why, because those assumptions, they're the things that are eventually going to bite us in the butt. They're the point where we didn't see that coming. We didn't know that was going to happen. So each of these dimensions is of critical importance when creating that ideal type, that strategy. But there's no way you're going to get all the information you need about all of these. It's just not possible. So at what point, and here's a question, at what point do you say, I've got enough information? Time out, I've got enough information.
Well, if you think that acquiring, for example, additional information produces diminishing returns, the clarity of your vision, or for example, if you see that your additional information actually starts making no sense.
Right, or it's either repetitive or it makes no sense. We spoke about this last week. Now here's the thing though, there's something else about this that's really important. At some point you actually say, I don't need to know that. I don't need to know about that. So you choose. It's no longer about too much information. It's not the information overload, it's I can get by, I can get what I want in the world without going in depth on that aspect, whatever aspect it is, right? Now, Gray suggests that there is no one element that is going to usurp or be the predominant element. Each of them has equal weight in the system. Do you agree with that? Looking at these elements, we've got people, society, culture, civilization, politics, religion, ethics, economics, logistics, organization, administration, information and intelligence, strategic theory, doctrine, theory, technology, time. Any of these seem like they might be important, more important than others?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. But if you look at it from the point of view, will my strategy fail if I do not turn enough attention to one of these points, then I should say that they would be equally.
Right, so you're saying it depends on what you're doing, and some of these may be more important than others. My argument is going to be that there's at least one here which is kind of critical. At least one of these is a critical. If you don't have this, everything else is just.
Well, you'll probably go with relationships.
Hey.
Because relationships allows you to set out your vision.
No, I mean, it might be relationships, but I can do things on my own. I mean, unless you're talking about a relationship with a chair. You know, like, there's something here that you absolutely have to have.
If you don't have resources, you can't do anything.
I, as an individual, have resources. I have my body, I have my mouth, I got my arms and my leg, well, my arms and my wheelchair, right? So like, there's something here that we all have on some level, but it's an essential aspect of this. You need it, and otherwise, without it, you can't do things. Keep looking.
Well, it's action in that case, right?
No, you're looking at the big picture. I'm looking at the smaller ones.
It's organization.
What?
Organization.
Why?
I mean, because it includes the fans and forward planning, and pretty much that's the essence of actually achieving the goal, I would say.
Okay, but now you're talking about strategy in terms of the thought process. I'm saying, in order to get it done eventually, what do you need?
Information.
Nope. I mean,
Time.
on some. Oh, why?
If you do not have time to do something, then you will not be doing it.
Make sense? There's at least one element here which is absolutely critical to be able to get things done. You need to know that you have the time in order to do the thing, or that you can make the time to do the thing. And that's a very important difference between people. Have you ever had someone say, well, let me see if I can find time for that? What's the difference between saying that and saying, I'm going to make time for that?
The prioritizes.
It's a priority, right? So now we find that perhaps, I'm not saying definitely, but perhaps we need to look at time as a critical element in the strategic stage of a process. How much time do we expect this to take? And how much time can we allow this to take, right? Because if we don't define that really clearly, and even give it an if-then. If this happens, then we can give it more time. When this happens, we can make time to do this other thing, right? But if we don't think in those terms, if we don't prioritize on some level how we're using our time, then the rest of this sort of falls apart. Does that make sense? Like, all these other elements are all nice, all well and good, but like, if you don't have time to take care of whatever it is you got to take care of, where are you going? What are you doing? Doesn't work. And yet, I'm going to say that time as an element, it shouldn't exist as an element. It should be exterior to all the other elements. It should be something which we look at and go, this is an essential aspect, but I don't want to look at it as an element unto itself. I want to make it part of something bigger. So what I'm going to suggest is that, well, he gives us, I think there's like 30 different things on this board right now. There's really about 10 elements that are really relevant to strategy, okay? And I'm purposely ignoring the receiver, the other, the end element here, which is not really relevant for the moment. When we look at strategy and we start putting these elements together, we need to start deciding where are we going to put our emphasis. What do I mean? If you're in an emergency situation, you've suddenly been hit with an emergency. There are lines here which you can't really see so well. There's a line that attaches that to that, and then that to that, and then that to that, and there's a line that goes this way, and there's a line that goes here. You're in an emergency situation. Which line, that one, or that one, is going to have greater weight in your strategic thinking, in the immediate? Why?
Because when I'm in emergency situations, the first thing that I need to do is to understand what the situation is, what my options are to do different things, what my resources are, and then I should go.
Right. So if you think about it, if you're in an emergency situation, a situation where there's not a lot of time, right, you're more likely to follow the path of what we would call least resistance. You're going to start here, you get hit by something that's going on. You're immediately going to try and figure out as much as you can about that as quickly as humanly possible, right? You're then going to move into, well, what do I have that can immediately respond to that thing? And then you're going to do your utmost to command the situation so that the outcome is to your liking, right? And you go, well, why doesn't everyone just do that? That's strategy right there. You're all done, right? That's strategy when you don't have time. Right? You don't even get a chance to think strategically as much. You literally are jumping right into the operative and tactical. Like you're going, nope, here we go, intelligence, good. I'm not even thinking about what I expect. I'm not creating a true vision of future. I just know that I don't want what's happening now to be what's happening then. Okay? So you move across that top line. Now, if you have lots of time, it's not a surprise. You've got months to plan. You've got years to go. It's fine. Which one would you follow?
Well, I would probably jump from one to one.
Okay, you're saying you go somehow jump around here.
I would go to intelligence, then to analysis, and from analysis I would create vision.
Right. So you're saying you'd follow the schematic that I showed on the videos, which is you go, okay, I've been inspired to do something. I'm going to go help the old people who are falling in the shower, or I'm going to go help the whatever, or I'm going to resolve some issue that I see as a critical issue that requires our attention. I'm going to gather as much intelligence. I'm going to do an analysis of it. I'm going to create vision, right? So these three right here seem at the get-go to be strategy, don't they? I mean, think about it. If I go back, one more, strategy. Gather all the intelligence, analyze it, get it all together, and create a vision with ideal types and if-then statements. So is that strategy?
Yeah.
Sort of. Okay, so here's the thing. When you're in the strategic stage, your focus will be predominantly here. Right? When you're in the strategic stage of the process, your focus will be here. But your job is to delineate how the rest of this is expected to go. Right? You've done the intelligence gathering about yourself, which means you should know what resources and how much time and energy you have available. You should have a clue how long it's going to take you to do the thing, what energy, how much time a week, whatever it is. You should have the time and the ability to then say, well, given that, here are some of the limitations and expectations I have for the future. And you go, okay, well, here's how I'm going to organize and prioritize for that future. Here's how I'm going to organize and prioritize for that future. And then you say, okay, what are the things that I can control? What are the things that I have to leave to chance, that I'm willing to leave to chance? And what operations do I have to put into play next? The thing is that we do all of this multiple times. But the priority here at the strategic stage is this. If I don't have any of this, none of this makes sense. If I don't have a vision, how can I prioritize? How can I organize? How can I even put into play operations for something for the future? Right? I can't even start saying, well, if we put into play this operation, then here's my expectation. Can't do it. So the focus has to be on those first four: inspiration, whatever is inspiring us, and moving through. But that's not enough, because if I'm moving through this process and I have multiple priorities, many, many different fields and theaters of operation that I need to work in, now I need to start saying, wait a second, I'm not creating just one, like, I don't know, birthday party, right? I'm not just birthday party, right? But it's a whole thing that I have to need to organize. All the different aspects of birthday party. I have to start breaking it down into its parts and say, well, what do I expect the different parts to be? Did that make sense what I just said? Sweet. Now I want to go through each of these a little bit more in depth than I did in the videos. Okay, I already started speaking about intelligence gathering, and there are a ton. There are a ton of ways that we gather intelligence. Human intelligence, SIGINT, open source, all that stuff. Once we've gathered intelligence, the question becomes, well, how do we analyze it? How do you analyze intelligence that you get? Do you just go by your gut? You go by your brain. Okay, so you use your brain, you go, okay, I'm analyzing. For me, and this is for me, I tend to think of it in one of two ways. First one, like I already spoke about, think of it as like a tree. Each topic is its own tree with its own branches and its own whatever. So I've got birthday party over here, and I got family, dinner over there, and I've got over there, and each one of them is its own tree that needs its own stuff. Another way to think about it, though, is like a filing system, like boxes, okay? And what you're gonna do is you're gonna make sure that you understand what goes in which box and how they connect. That analysis is a system that you create for yourself or for your institution. And it automatically opens you up to bias. I'll give you an example. There's a company that I follow on LinkedIn, and they recently got Series A funding, which means they've made the first leap into being funded as opposed to trying to pay things out of pocket. And they are expanding. And they're advertising, the way they're advertising or putting out their open positions is by saying, hey, we've got Series A funding. Look, we made this much money. We've got this much money in our bank. Come join us. I reached out to one of the VPs there and I was like, why is the focus on the funding? Like if I'm doing the analysis strategically, that doesn't seem like where you want to be putting your focus for vision. Like, why would you do that? And he goes, I didn't even think about it. We've been bootstrapped for so long. We've been paying out of pocket for so long. We're so thrilled to be in a situation where we have the money to do something that it created a cognitive bias in how they were presenting future. Does that make sense?
So it was based on the gut, not based on the brain.
It was based on an analysis that had a cognitive bias to it. It's based on an analysis that has a cognitive bias. It's important to us, therefore it must be important to them. It's important to me, therefore it must be important to you. And we do that a lot. Countries do that all the time. Afghanistan is a really good example. So is Iraq, right? Democracy is important to us, should be important to you. So we take each of these elements, and these two, and we create this vision. Now, when we analyze for a vision, what we need to do is understand where the information applies and how we can use it for leverage. Your analysis is supposed to recognize the points that if you poke at them, it will create change, right? It's supposed to create for you a sense of, here's where I have to focus for vision to take place. And then I go, well, if that's the case, then I'm going to do these things, and those things will change the world. And now you can say, hey, I know what I want. I know how it's going to look. And a vision statement is very, very important. And I would say, no matter what you're trying to do, having birthday party, again, let's take that as the example. We want to have a birthday party for Jaegers, okay? Jaeger's birthday party, okay, means X, Y, and Z for future. This is what he's going to want. Here's how I understand it. This is my analysis of it. And the vision that I have for that party is lots of people having a great time, cake, beer. Are you a beer person? No? Wine? Coca-Cola? Soda water! Okay.
But others can have beers.
No, fine, but the point is we're going to create that sense of like future vision of like, what do we want this party to look like? Based on what I know about Jaegers, what I know about the people who we're going to invite, I know what I want it to look like. And I go, okay, well, in an ideal world then, here's how much money I need. Here's how much time it's going to take me to get all this stuff together and get other people involved. Here's the we need a resource, we need a place to have the party, right? So resources is not just about me, it's about me and you, and also about geography, right? Geography is a resource. Me teaching in a classroom is important. I mean, we could go outside, but fundamentally being in the classroom is a geographic location that helps me fulfill vision. It gives me a space to teach, right? And I'm going to use the resources, but I'm going to use them in a very specific way. And I want us to take a minute and look at doctrine, because resources make sense to everybody. We all have resources, even if it's just our body, right? But doctrine is a whole different ballgame. Very few of us think about what our doctrine is, our values. We may have value statements, things that are important to us, but we don't really think about how those value statements impact how we choose to think strategically about if-then statements. Like, if my daughter talks back to me, is that something which requires punishment or not? How restrained do I have to be in how I respond to future events? Doctrine does three things, and they are very, very important. One, it limits us. It tells us how much energy and time and resources we are going to put towards whatever future we are trying to create. It's a limiting effect. In addition to limiting us, though, it also gives us a sense of, well, what am I allowed to do? What's permissible? And if I take the things that are permissible and I relate them to my resources, I can go, well, I'm allowed to use this money to buy this stuff. I'm allowed to use this geographic location for this party. I'm allowed to do this there. Or, I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to anyway. And that's a doctrinal statement. I'm saying my values tell me that I'm not supposed to be doing this thing, but I'm going to do it nonetheless. You say, wait, why? Sometimes that's a good thing. Can you give me an example of when that might be a good thing?
For example, if your doctrine is no longer appropriate to the present situation.
Possibly. I mean, yes, people will change their doctrine may give room for you to work beyond it when it's no longer appropriate. But I'm thinking of something else. When we call someone a hero, what are we talking about? What's heroism?
Going above and beyond normal.
Going above and beyond the call of duty, right? When someone does something that is above and beyond what would be expected of them. But doctrine defines expectation. Does that make sense? Someone is using the resources that are at their disposal to do something above and beyond what we expected. These are the people who get bonuses and get noticed because they've done more than what was expected of them in a situation where everyone else was doing what was expected. Okay? Doctrine, therefore, does three things. It limits how we use resources. It creates a sense of what is permissible with the resources we have. And it defines for us what exemplary work looks like. Exemplary work. Someone who's doing something beyond what we could have possibly expected, given the time that they had, given the resources that they were provided for it. And we define that, we delineate it at the strategic stage. We set a sense of, this is what I expect from you. I don't expect more than this. Do this and you're good. And that's how we can start prioritizing, right? Because if I know what my expectations are from the resources that I have, including human resources, and I know what the limitations are on those resources, I can now start saying, well, this I can do now, this can be done later, and that is going to have to wait a while, and here's things which I am not able to do because it goes against my values, or my culture, or the norms, and all of those things that make up doctrine. Did that make sense?
I just want to say
Yeah.
that while a person who does something like that might be a hero, they might also become a villain by going.
100%.
For
100%.
example, if your organization's doctrine says that you don't torture people, and then you go, well, it's less serious to torture some people, then it doesn't look very good.
Correct. And so you go, well, wait a second. How do you allow yourself then to ignore your doctrine? And does that mean you're still you? Right? If we think about this for a minute, right? If we say, here's what we expect from our military, and they do something which goes against those expectations, beyond them in a way which just doesn't seem morally right, we have a problem, right? Because now they're no longer expressing our values to the world. If our salespeople treat everybody really, like we have a salesperson, he treats everyone rudely. He's great at making sales, but he treats people like garbage. Now, if the sale is the most important thing to me, as part of my doctrine, as long as you make the sale, there's a movie like that, isn't there? Sell Me a Pen. Do you guys know what I'm talking about, right? The doctrine there was, I don't care what you have to do, including breaking the law and the rules and the norms, and I don't care, sell the pen. Okay, and that allows for organization. And organization is an element unto itself. I mean both physical organization, how does the pyramid hierarchy look? And who's responsible for what? But also an organization of priorities and expectations of future events. Here are the major stepping stones I think we need to hit in order for us to move forward. I haven't yet said how I'm going to do this, though. This is the thing. Recognize something. I haven't yet spoken about how I'm doing any of this. I've said, well, here's what I know. Oh, here's what I've gathered. Here's what I know. Here's where I want to go. Here are the resources I can put towards it. Here's my expectations in terms of values and things like that. And here's the things that I think I'm going to have to do in order to make that possible. I haven't done anything. I'm still in that strategic stage. Do you see it? And then we start going, well, what is it that we have to control as opposed to what do we control? What is it that we have to control in order for outcome to be successful? What are the things that I have to have command over in order for the future to happen the way I want? Right? And what can I let others take control over with the expectation that they are going to accomplish that mission, that task, and we will, as a group, now be in control of future events. And this is just as much a question of belief as these ones are. It's a belief right now. I believe that I have to control the following. I believe that I do control the following. What happens when you don't control that thing? Well, what? It starts controlling you, right? If you suddenly find yourself feeling like out of control, what does it feel like? It feels like the world, something else is controlling you, right? And it's very much that process. But you're not even out there doing yet. You're good. We're not even out there doing yet, right? And we also need to take a time to look at our risk. What is it that we're risking? What are the chances that we're taking? And this is just as important as that is, because this is defined by your doctrine, right? Your analysis impacts your doctrine. How you see the world impacts what you believe to be true and right and moral and ethical. And then from there, you start looking at the world and going, well, here's where I'm willing to take chance, and here's where I'm not. Here's the amount of risk that I'm willing to take. Okay? And then what we do is we say, in an ideal world, here's the operations that I would like to see us put into play. Now, operations, if you're starting something new, is a blank slate. What happens if you're a company that's been around for years and you've got operations that are going? Strategically, when you're at the strategic stage of a process, you go, wait a second. Are there any operations we need to stop doing? Is there anything here that's wasting resources or no longer driving resources in the right direction? Are there things that we've lost control over and we no longer want to have them part of the system that we're working within? Once we've done all of that, and we've sort of delineated these major elements in a clear fashion, then we can start moving into the operative. Why? Because I can tell myself, okay, here are the next things that I need to do in order to move tactically. But I have to move into the operative first. The operative is going to focus a little bit different. The operative is going to be less focused on this. It's going to be more focused on this. Okay? When we get into the operative, we start doing all kinds of analyses. We've already done the option A, option B analysis. We've already done devil's advocacy. We've done all those. Now we need to dig deeper. For each of the different trees, for each of the different priorities, we start asking questions. And there's different tools that we can use. One of them is something called a SWOT analysis. A SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, says, okay, given what I have to do, and what I know I can control and command, and where chances, and all these other things, what are the major strengths that I bring to the table that will allow me to move forward? What are the things that I can bring, or that my allies can bring to the table so that we can move forward? And what are the things that we can't do so much? Right? What are the things that we can't do internally that we don't have the capacity for? Okay? Once I've done those two, I'm going to look at things like, well, given that, I'm going to look at my environment and say, where does opportunity meet strength? Where can I use my strengths, and where does opportunity lie in the environment for me? What are things that I can get done easily, or relatively easily? And then what are the things that are going to make this really difficult for me, given what I know? Now here's the thing. There's a way to attach this to this. There's actually two ways to look at it like this. I'm going to give it to you again. That's the SWOT analysis. When this is laid out this way, how would you put the SWOT analysis as like 4 boxes? Just put it right on top of it. Does that make sense what I just said? Like if I had to put the boxes up here somewhere, how would I divide it? Like right here in the middle, over here.
Resources probably would be our strength.
Okay.
Strengths would probably, I would put into the chance box.
Okay, hold on. You're saying resources is strength?
Yes, this is threats.
Resources is strength. This is also strengths?
Threats.
Threats, okay. Sorry, couldn't hear you.
Sorry.
It's okay, you're fine. You're wearing a mask. It's good.
Okay.
Anyone?
Opportunities would probably go to command.
Okay, you're going to put opportunity up here?
Yes. And weaknesses. But probably organization.
Organization. Okay, so you're saying that's strengths, that's weaknesses, that's opportunity, that's threats. Okay, so I would say, slightly different, I'm going to put the line right here, and then I'm going to put another line right that way. A lot of people think these are their strengths. I have resources, I have time, I have this, no problem, lots of strengths. Most people don't realize how weak this is. Did that make sense? People believe they can control much more than they can. And when we do an analysis, we go, what do I control? And you go, oh wait, I thought I could control that. I'm not gonna be able to control that. Right? So a lot of weakness actually resides in the belief, remember we're talking the move from strategy into operative, right? The belief that I'm gonna be able to control stuff. Well, operatively, you're gonna go, wait a second, that's a false belief. Let's think about this for a minute. If I can shore up that command issue, if I can shore up where there's a problem with the things that I can control, then those weaknesses disappear. But if I don't even acknowledge them, I don't even say, hey, wait a second, weakness here, we might need to change this a little bit, and I plow forward, I'm in command! Where's everybody else? Very often, our opportunities will be based on how we see the world. Your ability to recognize opportunity and engage it, and your willingness to do so is dependent on your doctrine. If you're scared of doing something, you're less likely to do it, even if it presents opportunity. But if you can acknowledge opportunity, you go, wait a second, based on my values, is that I can do that. I'm allowed, this is an okay thing for me to do. Let's go. Right? So opportunity actually comes or seems to reside here in doctrine, because this is something we control. Does that make sense? I can change this if I need to. It shouldn't change much, but I can tweak it. And I mean, if we're talking statistics, well, what are the chances that this works? What are the threats that we're going to have to deal with? What are the things that might make this impossible? Where are we taking a chance? Because that's where threat is going to lie. When I'm taking a chance, right? And chance has got both positives and negatives to it, to be really clear, right? Most people say when you're taking a chance, you think about it as a negative, right? But you have a chance to do something. So it's both a threat, but it comes from that opportunity. I have an opportunity to do this. I have a chance. Oh, but that chance has risk to it. And that's a threat. And people are risk averse. And the level of risk aversion comes from here. Right? So this is going to determine how I see this. Did that make sense? This is one way to look at SWOT. Okay? It's one way to lay it over. There's another way, which we're going to talk about when we start talking about frameworks. Because there's another way to put this array out that it creates a different effect. When we're talking about the SWOT analysis, we are really talking about looking at reality. Now we're no longer looking at the maybes and the, what have I got? What are my strengths? What are the things that we can do? Really do. I understand what the priorities were strategically. It makes sense to me. But can that priority list that we've organized really work? Or do I have to change it? Does that make sense? All right, once we've done that, we can start taking the SWOT analysis and putting these things together. Strengths plus opportunities, strengths and threats, weaknesses and opportunities, weaknesses and threats. So we use these to create an understanding of what future actions are worthwhile. And this is one tool. There's lots of tools out there, okay? It's called the TOWs, which is just SWOT backwards, okay? Use of internal strengths to exploit external opportunities. Makes sense, right? I'm going to use my resources, the things that I can bring to bear, in order to engage things that my doctrine allows me to engage effectively. And I'm going to see those things as opportunities. I'm going to work to engage them as effectively as I can. Right? So, where's that one? So you're going to maxi strategy, right? You're maximizing your strength and you're going to maximize your opportunity. Everything it's an ideal world. Okay? The use of internal strengths to avoid or minimize the impact of external threats, right? I'm going to take my strengths and I'm going to try my darndest to beat the statistics. I'm not going to let chance win. I'm going to win. Okay? Now, in this case, you're going to maximize your strengths in order to minimize your threats. Do you see it? Maximize strengths to minimize threats. Maximize strengths in order to maximize opportunities. Next one. Overcoming an internal weakness by exploiting external opportunities. Well, hello, where's our internal weaknesses generally going to reside? It might be resources, but generally it resides where? In our doctrine. In how we see the world and what we believe to be right and true. And we go, okay, I have to overcome those internal weaknesses, those things that are making it hard for me, especially the things that I believe I can command, right? In order to exploit external opportunity. I'm going to take the things that I believe I can command, and I'm going to use them in order to try and get external opportunity on my side. Does that make sense? Right? So I'm going to try and minimize, as much as humanly possible, how my internal weakness, especially the things that I thought that I could command, are going to impact my ability to engage with the opportunities that I see available to me. And last but not least is overcome internal weakness and minimize external threats. Right? I want to really make an effort to say, okay, wait a second. I've got all these weaknesses, right? I've got all these issues of things that I can't control. But I'm under threat. Something's making it hard for me to move forward. Something's going to make this difficult. Well, what do I do about that? When we see these, we can start saying, well, here's where I need to focus my energy. Where do you want to focus? Where would you want to focus? Are we focusing on this, that, or that? If you're creating priority list, where do you want to put your maximum priority? And why? And it's a not fair question. I'm going to admit it's a trick question, but still. Come on. What do you think? Don't make me call on people. All right, go ahead. What do you think?
If I am putting my maximum priority into something, I personally think I would put it into maybe. It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it is. But this is what think about it. This is what it's like to actually be under this is what you're doing in real.
I want to fix my weaknesses for sure, and I would want to fix.
So you're somewhere here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe opportunities.
So you're saying I'm going to look at the things that I'm not in control of, and I want to see how I can use something outside of my institution, outside of myself, to maybe bring those things under my control. That's what you're saying? Mm-hmm. Anyone agree or disagree with that? Want to challenge it? Want to take it to a different level? I'm going to call on each of you. You're all going today. Oh no! You're next. What would you choose? Come on, what would you choose?
Maybe this one.
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
Why? No, come on, why? Well, what does this one do? Do you understand what it does? Do you understand how this one sees the world? This one is about maximizing my internal strength in order to maximize my opportunity. Ay. You did that on purpose.
They're kind of all very important. They're difficult to choose.
Yeah. This requires us to know what we're talking about.
We need a circumstantial context.
Thank you. Right? This is all about reality. This is all about, wait a second, I'm supposed to be looking at something real. Theoretically, it doesn't work anymore. I can't do this strategically. Does it make sense? Because there are going to be times, I told you it was a trick. There's going to be times when this makes a lot of sense. Because in the iteration that I'm in, where I'm going now, what I have to be working on right at the moment, I can maximize my strengths and maximize my opportunities. And the risks and the other things, they're not so great that I need to worry about them. Or the weaknesses that I perceive internally aren't so bad that I need to worry about them as much as I want to prioritize maximizing my strengths and my opportunities. Then there are going to be other times when you're going to go, wait a second, reality's biting me in the butt. I don't know what to do here. I have a serious weakness about what I have under my control. I don't know what I can do. I want to minimize threat. I feel like I'm under attack. I need to minimize that. What are the weaknesses that I need to shore up right now? And then you're going to focus on those. And you're going to change them. You're going to make them different. Right? So it depends on circumstance. It depends on what strategic process are we talking about? In which environment? In relation to whom? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it was a trick question, but it's not a trick question. Because we also have a tendency, a bias, to feel like this one's better than that one. And a dangerous bias. Right?
You don't need to pick one. Like, there's no option of like, nah, I'm not doing anything. I have to pick one.
Well, I mean, there is the ability to say, I'm not playing this game, see you later, right? Which you can do, we've spoken about that. We've spoken about the fact that like you have to want to play the game. If you don't want to play the game, then I mean, you're letting power control you, like you're letting the power control you, as it were. You're letting circumstances control you, right? But in an ideal world, you'd be able to say, oh, it's always going to be, but that's not, like we don't live in that world. Right? We are going to have to adjust how we engage our SWOT analysis to circumstance, and that will provide us an understanding of what's the best choice here. And very often you're going to find yourself doing one and another. Like, I'm going to be trying to do this at the same time that I'm trying to do that in some ways. Right? I've got some things that I definitely feel like are my strengths. I'm going to try and hit the opportunities that I can with it. At the same time, wait, I know that there are some weaknesses about things that I don't control. I want to try and make sure that any threat that's coming up as a result of that is mitigated, pushed off a little bit. Not such a big deal. Make sense? Great. So what ends up happening is we start playing this game of, well, what kind of interaction? Are we talking about something where this is going to be ongoing, or is there a finite, this is going to end and somebody's going to win, or it's going to be successful? You know, a birthday party has a definite ending to it, right? When you get to birthday party, you can no longer plan, you can no longer maneuver, you can no longer operatively decide where your strengths and your weaknesses are. You kind of need to go, okay, game over. Right? Did we do that well? And then you do a post-op, right? You go, well, did we do that well or not? But then there's things where like, you know, like marriage. It's an infinite game. I mean, that's how you should look at it, at least. If you look at it as a finite game, you've got a problem.
It is finite because after all you will die.
But then I'm not playing anymore because I'm dead. As long as I'm alive, it's still infinite.
No, I don't know what the difference is. No, but you could say, okay, I have a finite goal to have this marriage stand until I'm dead and no longer able to play.
Then you're playing the infinite game. I'm willing to continue playing, even if it's not the best situation for me, until one of the players simply falls off the map. What?
No, I see what you mean.
Does it make sense? Okay. And that's defined by purpose. That's defined by something we hit on at the strategic stage when we're talking about vision. Why are we doing this thing? You should totally eat. Go for it. Wait a second. Why? If you're doing the birthday party, that's your purpose. That defines infinite or finite. That defines how you see the game that you're playing. The strategies that you can put into play. Because there are certain things you do when they're finite, and you go, okay, no problem. But if you were to, if you're doing a birthday party that is going to be every single day for the next, forever, you're going to choose your resources differently, how you use your resources differently. Wouldn't you? Yeah.
What, for example, like Operation Barbarossa, okay? They were not expecting to take that long. They had a purpose, so technically it's a finite game.
No, infinite games have purpose.
Oh.
That wasn't what I was trying to say. Okay, let me make it clear. The purpose will define if it is a finite game or an infinite game.
Oh, no, hold on. I watched the videos.
It's fine. Does that make sense what I just said?
Yeah.
Okay, purpose defines finite or infinite. It's not that I've chosen infinite or I've chosen a finite game and therefore.
So in this same scenario, when you say a battlefield is an infinite game because till the purpose isn't reached, you will go on and on.
That depends, because it used to be that when you won on the battlefield, the game was over,
Never.
right? Chop off the head of the king, the opposing king, you take over the land, and the game is over, right? Nowadays, asymmetric warfare, guerrilla warfare, terrorism, these are not finite games. Let's think about why for a second. I want to let's take a pullback. Why is the war on terror an infinite game?
Because it will never end. As soon as you kill someone or the leader, someone else will just pop up.
Right? The only way to eliminate terrorism would be to eliminate every single person who believes in that idea in any way, shape, or form.
So it's possible.
No. It would be, the possibility of it happening is so slim that, like, we're talking, because think about it. You kill this guy, but his kid now finds out that you killed him because of this idea. Now what?
So does it mean to do like an entire religion, like Hitler tried to do?
Yeah, you would have to exterminate every single person who believes in the idea in any way, shape, or form in order to get rid of it. Okay? Which, I've heard people be like, well, why don't we just bomb the bejeebers out of everyone? Because that's when we go back to here and we go, well, wait a second. That doesn't allow us to do this. Women and children don't get killed unless they're fighting. And even then we try and avoid it. Why?
I've always wondered, why do we believe in this?
What, the women and children shouldn't be killed?
Children, I'm assuming it's because they're just children and they should be more innocent because they're newer in this world?
We hope. Some of the children I've met are like, I don't know.
Children make excellent soldiers, by the way.
Yeah,
They're easily indoctrinated.
I'm saying the potential rationale, I'm not saying...
She's not saying he agrees with it. Yeah.
I'm just like a little bit confused about the doctrine because like many of us grew up in a certain way, but like you take the doctrine and you're like, take it to Hamas and you say we're following this certain way. Like, I don't know. I'm just a bit confused.
Okay, I want to understand what you just said because I want to figure out where the weakness is, what you're not controlling. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I can control my doctrine.
That's correct.
But I
But
can't control anyone else's doctrine.
correct. So what happens if your doctrine and their doctrine are not the same? You're not playing by the same rules. What happens?
Probably the ones that have a different doctrine are going to take advantage of that. And
They may.
for example, the doctrine of us of not killing children and the doctrine of them of we don't give a schnitzel whether they kill children or not, so we'll use them as human shields. It's a struggle of doctrines.
They will look into our doctrine and see it as an opportunity for them. And they do. They use they use children as human and women as human shields. Why? Because of our doctrine. It sits right there. Do you see it? We try and do the same thing. We look at what their doctrine is, and we go, well, where does that give us room to play? Where do we have opportunity in that? There's doctrine that they use that we can do that. They have a doctrine of tunnel building. That can be to our advantage just as much as it can be to a weakness and a threat, depending on how we use it. Does that make
I
sense?
would say our doctrine is more moral, and therefore we have more vulnerability. I guess it's very subjective.
Morality depends on what people believe to be moral. There
That's
is no like.
Well, that's exactly the point. That's exactly what he's saying. He's saying that we have a moral standard that we hold ourselves to, and the other, in this case, may not have that same moral standard. Correct? That's what you were
I
saying?
meant the one more moral, and he's saying that it depends on perspective.
Yeah, I'm saying what moral is depends on perspective.
Well, yeah, because they don't look at us as moral, they look at us as conquerors.
Yeah.
Also regarding, for example, in short term, using children as babies, as human shields, using children as human shields may be to their advantage. But in long term, I do not think it will, because instead of those children going to schools and learning something useful, they have to stand there during those protests and serve as human shields. And so in long term, it may be to their disadvantage.
Yeah, that's true.
It may be.
We don't know yet for sure.
We don't know, right? Did that make sense what we just said?
Yeah.
Did that make it clearer?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So, we start determining what the game is and how we intend to play it. But based on our vision and our purpose, why we're doing the thing we're doing. If it's for your survival, you're almost automatically talking about an infinite game. If all you want to do is survive, companies that want to just keep being a company, they don't want to win, they don't want to beat their competition, they're going to play the infinite game. Okay? Parents need to play the infinite game. You can't win at parenting. You can't win at parenting, I'm sorry. Doesn't happen.
Parenting, I'm sorry.
Parenting, you can't win at parenting. Okay? And then you have to ask a question, well, based on what I know about the other and myself and the relationship that we have or are going to have, is this a closed game or an open game? What do I mean? Are there rules? Like rules not set by my moral standards.
In which case? Parenting?
No, any of them. Any of them. Are there rules? For instance, chess has a very clear set of rules, and it is a sequential move game, right? I move, you move, I move, you move, I move, you move, I move, you move. Soccer has a very clear set of rules. Sorry, football. But it is a simultaneous
No.
game. Why not?
Because it's not I move, you move, it's I try to take it, you try to take it, and whoever has it.
It's a simultaneous game. We're both moving at the same time trying to get advantage.
I guess, but it's not like chess where,
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's not like chess.
oh, okay, yeah.
I said, chess is a sequential move game. It's a sequence. I move, you move.
Right.
I move, you move. Soccer?
No.
Make sense? This is also true in interactions. We can see, most interactions are not sequential. Right? Most relationships are not sequential. Okay? But sometimes you can set a sequential rule into place for a specific interaction. I'm going to do something, then you're going to do something. I'm going to do this, and then you're going to do that. That's how we're going to play. Okay? So it's a question of the rules that are in play. What are the rules and how do they impact what I'm allowed to do? When I'm allowed to move? And then the question becomes, well, are we enemies? Or is this interaction that we're having towards a mutual future because we're cooperating? Right? I'm going to move my piece here, and then my ally is going to move their tanks to there. We're doing it simultaneously, sequentially, depending on how we've decided to maneuver, right? Based on rules we've set in place. But we're moving in a coordinated fashion that allows us to be cooperative. Okay, but he's still my other. Does that make sense? And then zero sum versus a non-zero sum game. What's a zero sum game? You guys should know this.
Means there is only one victor. If someone wins and everyone else has to lose.
Somebody wins, everyone else loses. Then there are non-zero sum games. I might win part of this, and you might come out of this okay. What happens if a military believes it's playing a zero-sum, non-cooperative, simultaneous, finite game?
It's gonna be tough.
No, it's not. No, it depends on your objective, on your purpose. Maybe it makes sense.
Well,
It might make sense. When would it make sense?
For example, kill Osama bin Laden.
Zero-sum game. He's got to die.
Right.
I have no intention of cooperating with him on this. This is not a sequential move game. You can move and I can move at the same time. That's fine. My purpose is definitely finite. I want you dead. But on the other hand, how does he want us? Dead. Up until the point where he says, I just want my organization to keep alive so that we can move beyond you. Yeah.
Can you say sequential might be a reactionary move? For example, you could argue that why did they want to kill Osama bin Laden? Because he was the leader of the Al-Qaeda group who committed the 9/11 attacks.
Okay.
So wouldn't that be considered sequential somehow? Because it's a reaction to what they did. So
That's a reaction. I don't think it's sequential. Because if we talk about sequential, we're really talking about the idea that in order for you to move, I have to move.
I mean, but I feel that's the way America felt like. We got attacked, now it's our turn. Like that was pretty much George Bush's speeches after 9/11.
No, that I agree with. I'm not arguing that point.
Right.
I totally agree with your analysis of this was definitely a reaction to that. So if you want to take the broad perspective, you might be able to say, hey, look, they're actually playing a sequential game. They moved, then they moved, and then they moved, and then look what happened. And then they moved, and then they moved. You could maybe make the argument, maybe. But I think that if you think about it, once 9/11 happened, everybody was moving. America was moving, and ISIS was moving, and Al-Qaeda, and everybody was moving. Does this make sense? This is a operative understanding of the world. This is not strategy at this point. Do we understand why this is not strategy? Because strategy should have already delineated this on some level. Expectations. I expect this to go on this is a process which is just going to continue on forever. Or this is a process which has an endpoint to it. Right? I have purpose, I have vision. Vision ends here, birthday party. I have vision, this is going to go on until we die. Or until one of us decides we're no longer playing. Okay. Once I've made that, then all these other things start coming into play. I need to start understanding, well, what are the rules of the game that I'm playing at? And one of the major questions we need to ask at this level is, what didn't I ask? It's really interesting. When you look at the elements like this, it seems, like we said, this is like the strategic focus, right, where you're going to spend most of your time. And then in operative, we said we were going to be looking at this, right, which is why this makes sense. Does that make sense? Because this is where resources and doctrine come into play. Doctrine delineates all of this stuff. But, go back to it. If you're here, well, how are these and these impacting this in the moment? It's not like these got left behind. Does that make sense what I just said? Strategy, strategic phase, right? You're going to focus predominantly on intelligence gathering, analysis, and vision. That's going to be the primary focus of it. And then you're going to engage, look at all these other internal things, resources, weaknesses, right? In order to be able to move into the operative stage where you can start setting clear priorities and specifically putting these resources to these priorities, etc. But when you're in the operative, don't you still need intelligence gathering? I mean, in order to set priorities, don't you need an update every once in a while about, has reality changed?
I mean, this is a continuous process, and even your strategy can change because of changing, circumstances.
Right. So if your strategy changes, then you're getting buffeted back all the way to the strategic phase.
True.
It happens. But I'm saying, even when you are willingly in the operative stage, you know you're there, you're moving forward, right? You've moved forward. Now what? You go, I still need to know what's going on in the world. I still need to understand reality. Did that make sense? In order to prioritize, in order to understand this. So we ask questions, what didn't you ask? What didn't you ask that's related to an earlier challenge that you faced? Or what didn't you ask for this specific project? About this priority that we've set? And you ask that same question about things like, well, what didn't you consider in terms of the challenge? At the strategic stage, what is it that you need to move forward to do now in order so that the projects will come out to be successful? Okay. With that, we're going to move into the projects for a minute. Does that make sense? You guys are presently at the political stage of a project. I saw 0 discussion on Discord. Boo. Boo. Now, what was it that made it so difficult for you to start writing on Discord?
No time.
Constraints. Time?
No ideas.
No ideas. No ideas?
Time too, probably, but I will probably.
Probably time as well. We're students and we don't have time for anything.
I have my mother's birthday to prepare.
Mazata.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now I can.
All right. I'm going to take you guys on a challenge for a minute. Working as a group. Let me see if I have things here to do this with. I do. Working as a group, I would like you to make a bridge with these.
From where to where?
On the floor. Just a bridge. Do you know how to do it? Okay. Now you're thinking to yourself, how do we do this? How is this related to the project? I'll talk while you guys work. Go ahead. You can take them.
Wait, is there more information?
What?
A bridge for what? For what?
I have to be able to like push a little bit on it and it can't fall down.
Can it be a 2D bridge?
No, it cannot be flat. It actually has to be a bridge.
Okay.
You're going to use it in engineering?
While you're doing that, I'm going to talk to you about project. Hey, no using phones or anything, by the way.
Like he's an engineer.
We used to build bridge out of spaghetti, but we had marshmallows to stick it together. Do you have marshmallows?
Can I see something?
Can we buy marshmallows, Professor?
I don't have marshmallows.
They have some at
I love marshmallows, but I don't have any marshmallows for you. Okay, I understand that you guys have had a problem with coming up with ideas.
Can I break this?
You can do whatever you want with them.
Okay.
Okay? If you think about it for a minute, ideas come predominantly from your own experience. What are some of the things that you want to do in the world? Right now I'm making you do something. I'm giving you something to do, right?
Like this.
Looking for no, it's okay. Looking for new ideas doesn't work. You can't just sit there and look for them. You actually have to talk about them. See, if each of you does this on your own, you're gonna fail.
Guys, are you even listening to what they were?
He heard me. They heard me. They heard me.
If not, we're failing right now.
Well, I'm not in terms of like an F.
I need to do the best.
Yes, and then we can do something like
Okay.
this.
That was close. Does anyone have bubble gum? No one?
See, he's thinking about it. He's asking an operative question. He's saying, "What are the resources
Yeah, I thought
I
about.
think it's.
can we pull into
I
play?"
thought about the bubble gum, but I thought it was a bit too disgusting.
That's not gonna work.
Yeah, and then you, yeah.
Maybe you put one in the middle though.
Yeah, like
Just like that, yeah,
yeah.
like those. Put one in the middle.
Of course, here's a bridge. Video. Exactly. And now it's like
How high it needs to be?
Fifth
How
one.
is this?
That's pretty good.
Yours okay?
Very good.
Oh, no, that's possible.
Do you see how when you've been given an idea, it's easy?
Yeah.
When you're given an idea, it's easy, right? I said build a bridge. That's all I said. I mean, I limited you a little bit. What? That's a pretty good bridge. There are a lot of ways to do this.
I wouldn't.
Here. Oh. Build this one, but
It would be
on
good-
the
we need to
side,
do like
a
so
golden gate,
for
okay?
the structure
It's a bridge built by the state, I guess.
by Israel
Yeah.
with all the engineering problems here.
With all
Oh, there you go.
some check.
That's
Something
awesome.
like this, I remember how to do it, but I don't know how to put them.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Okay. So wait a second. I want to time out for a second. He just said something really interesting. He said, I've seen something before, but I don't remember how to do it, right?
It was something like that. You put them in.
That's correct. That's actually the best way to do it. You can actually create a very nice bridge that way, right?
Really?
Yeah, really.
How? No, how? What do you remember?
Almost.
That's pretty cool.
Okay, so you put it inside.
Half over.
But I don't remember.
Come on,
So we're gonna do as
Careful.
Thomas Edison did, but it's still the
Delicately put it on
idea.
top of the
Okay.
phone. Slowly.
I'm enjoying this.
What?
Carefully.
That's not.
That's not helping.
Like you gave.
Okay.
Why they can't look it up?
Why can't you? Okay. What's he saying? What's he saying? I want to go back to what stage?
But you said in the beginning.
I said I created a doctrinal limit, right? Think about it. I created a doctrinal limit. What was it? You're not allowed to use your phones or your. But if you were to take your phone out and go, how do you make a bridge out of popsicle sticks? No glue. You'd find it in about 2 seconds flat, right?
Yes.
So it's annoying, right?
No, it's a way.
Right. But no, you're right. Functionally, what I did is I forced you to not be able to gather intelligence or to gather more resources. You literally jumped right into the tactical, right? You started to maneuver and think. You barely talked to each other about it,
Yeah, we don't
Because we
know.
don't talk.
right? I know, but you barely communicated with each other. Do you see it? That is why you're having a hard time coming up with ideas for your projects. You're not talking. Okay? I'm serious. The strategic stage, for it to work really well, requires a huge amount of communication. Okay? And the political stage is based on communication. It's based on the sharing of ideas. If you can't share different thoughts about what you might do, there's no way you create a project. Does this make sense?
Yep.
So when I don't see anything on Discord, as far as I'm concerned, the level of communication is way low. Because I don't even have the opportunity to say to you guys, hey, that's a good idea. Or, not such a good idea. Or, no, you can't do that, Chloe, because it's a topic we're not allowed to research on. So here's the thing. For you to move forward with this project, I need to see you communicate. Okay? Now there's a small group of you. If you guys choose to do the project, the people who show up in this class, choose to do this project, you go, okay, here's your group. There's 6 of you. It's 1 more than 5. I'm okay with that. What?
They don't listen.
They're not listening?
Put those below the thing.
Okay? If you guys want to work together on a group project, there is one opportunity that you may be able to take. I was recently approached by a friend of mine who works in San Francisco. He's working for a group that does very interesting stuff with climate change. But he's also very, very into the realm of intelligence. His research, his doctorate, everything about it was intelligence. He wants to create a knowledge tree of the state of the art of intelligence. Okay, what does that mean? He wants to take as much information as he possibly can about intelligence and show how all the little pieces are interconnected. This impacts this impacts this, here's where it shows up, here's where it shows up there. One of the things you could do is join some other project. You can say, hey, there's a project going on outside that I want to be part of. We're going to join that project. Does that make sense? Or you can come up with something that you guys want to do for yourself. I think, personally, it's much more interesting if you do for yourself. Because you will be more committed to the project if it's something that interests you. But I can come up with other projects you could do easy. Are you trying to break that? Oh, you're trying to dent it. Oh, cool.
No, I managed already.
Do you understand what I just said?
Yeah.
Do you understand why you guys did this? And this is great. Now, if I were to give one of you the ability to go look on, can you go look on your phone? How do you build a bridge? Do you have your phone? Go for it.
Doctrine changes quickly.
Well, this is what happens when you change doctrine. Watch what happens.
gonna be in Turkish though.
It's not going to be in Turkish.
No.
Did you find it?
Long suit. Good.
Alright. How to build a bridge with popsicle sticks. Bridges across the globe make up some of the most beautiful landmarks on the, I think this is not relevant. So how? Planning out your bridge. Determine the length of your bridge. You should consider how long you want to make your bridge before you even go shopping for supplies. There are multiple different sizes. Popsicle.
Okay, I don't think you found the thing you want.
Gather your supplies. This seems like you wrote it, Professor.
I did not, but go down. You got everything supply-wise. Go.
Ready your workshop direction. Decide what kind of bridge you want to make. Imagine it.
I don't think that's the one you want.
Draw your thing. This is a lot of...
Guys,
Why?
sorry, does this qualify as a bridge?
That's not a bridge.
If we continue stacking it up?
No, that's not a bridge.
Right?
All right, let me show you. I'm going to do it up here. Give me some of the top. Oh, I have some. I have. All right. It goes like this. I'm going to show you.
One more.
Sure.
And some more.
What happens when you know or have a sense that you know how something is done?
Maybe I can get going.
İçine sokuyor işte öyle bir şey. Şimdi bir tane oradan sokacağım. Böylesini düşünmüş.
And it's way more complicated than I thought about.
I'm doing it backwards, but I'm not doing it well.
Same state as that.
Yeah.
You're building an overturned arch.
Yes, I'm making an arch, right? But if you know how to do it, and you can do it well, which I've never been able to, what happens is you start to see that there are patterns. And you start taking those patterns and you make them work for you. This is not working well for me because it's also not flat. Excuse me a second. We're going to do it over here. And then we're going to call it a day. Okay? So one of the things that we learn is that sometimes we have to go back to the operative, or we have to go back to the, where is it? Or we have to go back to the strategic in order to move forward. But one of the things that we want more than anything is to avoid that. We avoid it by gathering as much intelligence as we can before we start. Like I said, I'm not very good at this. I'm not an engineer. But it does work. Here we go. And I'm not doing it well. I need another pair of hands. Did it make sense what I said?
Yes, it did.
I'm not going to try and do this right now. Did it make sense? If you had watched the video 3 or 4 times, and you're better than me with your hands, because I'm not very good, you would be able to do it, right? But you need to have that information, and it requires that you talk. It requires you to talk.
What I understood from this thing.
What?
What I understood from this thing that we need to communicate.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay, your job over the next week is to communicate on Discord. Go on Discord and start throwing out ideas. Hey, has anyone thought about doing a political campaign like this? Hey, you guys, let's throw a party like that. Hey, let's do something. I don't care what you're doing. I mean it really seriously. But I want to know what your project is designed to do. I'd like to see some purpose. Once you have purpose, we can start talking strategy. Then we can start gathering the intelligence. and start putting the things together and go, well, here's what we're going to need to get. Here's what we don't have. Here's what we do have. Here's what we need. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay? But
Do we actually then actually need to do the project? I'm asking, for example, okay, let's do the project. Let's install more garbage, not more garbage, but like the garbage
Recycling bins.
Recycling bins in about Barlan University. So after we come up with a plan on how to do it, we actually have to go and put it into action, like email, I don't know.
I mean, I wouldn't want you to do anything with Bar-Ilan University specifically.
No, but like in general.
Yes, I would like you to try and do the thing that you're doing. You have until June, okay? The purpose here is to actually try and do something in the world. I don't expect you to make great change. I don't expect you to open a company. But if you have an idea for something the best way you can do this is what's bothering you in the world. What is it that makes your life difficult? Choose something. Y'all have something that bothers you that makes your life difficult, guaranteed.
Israeli transport not being.
Okay, so great. If that is something that you feel like you can deal with, that you have some solution for, or you have some idea of how to resolve, why not try and resolve it? And if you don't have an idea of how to resolve it, and it's just simply going to be a pain point that you accept, that's also a strategic decision. You've sat there, you've thought about it, you've debated it, and you go, I don't have a way to resolve this. It's too far out of my power zone. I don't have the power, the capacity, even if I had the idea, the original idea of what the problem is. I don't have the idea of what's the resolution. I don't have vision. Does that make sense? You have to be able to translate that idea into vision. It's part of this process. So what else is bothering you guys?
The stuff that's bothering me requires change in legislation.
So are you going to create a lobby that's going to try and make that change?
Well, ostensibly that's the way to go about it.
But what about small things?
About what?
Smaller things. Or things that interest you. What are you interested in? Sports?
Sports. Bias in sports, like the racism in sports.
Racism in sports interests you?
Yeah.
Okay. So for instance, if you were to try to do a project about that, could you come up with some ideas of what you could possibly do? Whether it's create some kind of campaign that will raise awareness about it. There's any number of different things you can. Does that make sense? There's any number of things you can go. Like, you're saying I have to go and do this. Even if you were to just make a campaign or to create a movement or start a movement that does something. Even if you drop the movement at the end of the school year and you go, guys, this is great for our project, we're done, you've still done something. You've still taken this through process. Does this make sense what I'm saying? Yeah. You guys just need to talk. You guys need to be like, well, I like this. Well, I'm interested in that. Well, what can we do with this? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Sweet. See you all next week.
Okay.
Thank you.